Welcome to the Shadows of Fear channel. Now I will guide you through a world of darkness, witches, and unknown creatures. I hope this helps you disconnect from your daily routine and relax. To avoid any visual distractions, we will leave the screen black and let your imagination run wild. Before we begin, write in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is in your country. Now, let's begin. Are you sure you want to hear what comes next? There are things once seen, once known, that can't be forgotten. But if you're certain, keep your eyes wide open. Don't look away. Shadows have a way of noticing those who dare to name them. It always started the same, a faint whisper, like dry fingernails brushing against old wood. Never loud enough to be sure, but just present enough to make you mute the telly and sit still, listening. That's how it was the first night. Marta had been living alone for 6 months in an old flat in Belgrano. She wasn't superstitious, didn't believe in ghosts, in presences. Not until the voice started speaking from behind the door she always kept locked. At first, she thought it was just a neighbor. But this voice wasn't coming from the hallway. It was inside her home, and it didn't ask for help. It didn't cry. It just murmured nonsense, words that meant nothing but left her heart pounding like she'd been running. "Almost there," it whispered one night, and the door creaked open, just a sliver, without a hand touching it. Marta sealed the lock with hot wax, piled furniture against the door, slept with a knife in one hand and the television on full volume. But the voice didn't need the door to open. The voice got in anyway. One night she woke up because someone was watching her. She couldn't see them, but the air in the room was colder than the dead of winter. There was breath on the mirror, words written in mist, gone before she could read them. The last time anyone heard her, she was screaming from behind the locked door. When the police forced it open, the room was empty. Just a cracked mirror and one phrase written in blood from the inside. "Now I'm the one knocking from outside." If you're enjoying these dark tales and want more, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to Shadows of Fear, and share your thoughts in the comments. Every bit of support helps us keep exploring the unknown together. Come, be part of this community, and don't miss a single story. Now, let's continue. And no, I don't know where to start. I'm trying not to throw up while I write this. My skin itches, my fingernails are coming loose, my mouth is full of a metallic taste that won't go away, like I'm rotting from the inside out. Listen to me. Please, listen carefully. Don't make the same mistake I did. It was in a town no one talks about, El Chacal. The few old people who still fear the name used to call it. It's somewhere in the south of Entre Rios. It's not on any map. I went there for work. Some research on rural rituals, anthropology, they said. They offered me money and I said yes, but that wasn't a town. It was a nest. A nest for something that should never have been born. I arrived at dusk. Everything smelled like manure and dried blood. The houses were made of adobe, most of them abandoned, but not empty. On the corners there were figures covered in red rags. They didn't move, they didn't breathe, but I knew they were watching me. And the church didn't have a cross. It had a column of bones jammed into the bell tower, like someone had climbed over corpses to reach heaven and spit in God's face. A woman with no eyes greeted me. Her eyelids were sewn shut, but she spoke to me like she could see inside me. "The flesh remembers," she said, "and your fresh meat." I didn't want to stay, but it was too late. The last bus had disappeared. Literally, the terminal was just a charred skeleton of a building. That night I stayed in a borrowed house, old, creaky. Everything smelled like churned earth, like when you dig up something that was never meant to come out. I barely slept, and at exactly 3:17 a.m. I started to hear the dragging. Not footsteps, not knocks. It was the sound of something wet dragging itself down the hallway, like a sack of viscera sliding across rotted wood. Then came the smell. Old meat, split skin, hot pus, and then the chanting. Come, come, open up, let it in, let me feel you from the inside. I tried to move, to scream. I couldn't. The bed shook with every breath from that thing that was getting closer. And the worst part, I started getting aroused. My body betraying me, like my flesh wanted to be touched by whatever was behind the door. Something scratched the wood, not like an animal, like a hand with warped bones. And it left something stuck there, a piece of human skin, still warm, throbbing like it was breathing on its own. When morning came, I found finger marks on my back, like something had grabbed me from inside the mattress. I wanted to leave. They told me I couldn't anymore. You were eaten with the eyes, said the woman with the stitched eyelids. Now you have to give something back. I don't really remember what happened the second night. Just flashes. Naked people. Warped tongues speaking backwards. A man without skin, nailed to a cross made of femurs, laughing non-stop while they devoured him alive. And me, licking something that wasn't food. It tasted like mother, like placenta, like larvae. At the end of the ritual, they left me lying in front of the church, with a phrase carved into my stomach using a rusted needle. You already belong to the womb. Since then, I can't stop smelling myself. I don't bathe, because something inside me sings when the water falls. I don't sleep, because when I close my eyes I feel my bones shifting, making room for another body. Yesterday I threw up worms, today, scales, and tonight I feel something trying to come out of me. Through my throat, through my eyes, through my navel. Don't come. Don't look for El Chacal, because once you hear the chanting, the flesh starts to speak, and when the flesh speaks, your will begins to rot. If you're enjoying these dark tales and want more, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to Shadows of Fear, and share your thoughts in the comments. Every bit of support helps us keep exploring the unknown together. Come, be part of this community, and don't miss a single story. Now, let's continue.
Okay, I don't know how to start. Don't ask who I am, or where I'm recording this from. It doesn't matter. I don't want to be found. Not even if something happens to me. Especially if something happens to me. I work nights. Yeah, that. I'm not giving details. The name of the club or the city doesn't matter. This isn't for attention. It's to leave something. In case someone else sees it. In case someone else goes into room 36. It started like a normal night. A quiet, awkward silence in the car. Some crusty old music on the radio. A few bad jokes I laughed at out of habit. The guy wasn't weird. You know, he didn't have that empty stare or anything like that. But when he said he had the money and he just needed me to listen for a bit, I got uncomfortable. Not scared, just uncomfortable. I still said yes, out of stupidity, out of need. When we got to the motel, I noticed something was off. It had no name, just a rusted sign that said rooms, with half the letters hanging off. No one at the front desk, no cameras, just a key already in the door at the far end. Room 36. The guy didn't go in. He left it for me. He said, "Listen to her. It won't hurt if you don't answer." And then he left. He left. I went in anyway, because I'm stupid. Because my brain's full of garbage, and I thought it was some weird fantasy. The room was cold, really cold, like a fridge, and it smelled different in every corner. At the door, it smelled like rotting roses. At the bed, like vomit. And in the bathroom, I don't know. I didn't want to go into the bathroom. I sat down, waited. 20 minutes passed. And that's when the radio, that old thing with rusty knobs, turned on by itself. It had no cable, no plug, and it started talking to me. No, it wasn't music, it wasn't static. It was a woman's voice, a voice that said my name, my real name, the one I haven't used in 10 years. Do you remember the dog you buried alive when you were 9? Do you remember the baby you didn't have and it wasn't an abortion? Do you remember when you said it wasn't me and it was? I pissed myself. Literally. I'm not lying. I started screaming, crying, scratching my arms, and the voice wouldn't stop. Every word felt like needles on my tongue, like the truth was stabbing into my bones. The bed knows, the mattress remembers, the walls lick up what you leave behind. I ran to the door. It was shut, not locked, sealed. Something was covering it from the outside. Pulsing flesh, like skin stuck to it, with veins. And when I touched it, it whispered from inside my hand, "You're ours now. You say yes, even when you say no." I screamed so hard I lost my voice. I don't know how I got out. I don't remember. When I woke up, I was naked in an empty field, with scars on my back shaped like letters. I couldn't read them myself, but someone took a picture. It said, "Channel open, transmission complete." Now it won't stop. The radio shows up wherever I go, in other people's homes, in the street. Yesterday, inside a trash bag, it always plays the same voice, always says things no one should know, things I never said out loud. And last night, while I was changing in the club's bathroom, I looked in a mirror, and I didn't see my reflection. I saw another woman, one with crusted over eyes, one who cried live worms, and she said, "Hold still. I'm testing your body. I don't know how much time I have left. I don't know if this is a hallucination, or an infection, or a divine broadcast. But if they offer you room 36, say no. Doesn't matter if they paid. Doesn't matter if you're tempted. Because when you open that door, you don't leave with the same body. Sometimes you leave with more body than you came in with. Sometimes you leave multiplied. And sometimes You don't leave it all.
If you're enjoying these dark tales and want more, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to Shadows of Fear, and share your thoughts in the comments. Every bit of support helps us keep exploring the unknown together. Come, be part of this community, and don't miss a single story. Now, let's continue.
They told me not to talk about this, but it's done. I saw it. It touched me. And when something like that touches you, you're not a person anymore. You're something else. A copy. An echo. But I want someone to know. In case someone sees it. In case someone chooses it. It was 3 nights ago. I swear. Or I think. I lost track. I don't know. I was at the old rest stop on Camino Negro, the one next to the empty lot. You know the one? The client showed up in a dark pickup, no plates. The windows were tinted so deep you couldn't see inside. He only cracked the window a little. The voice was male, I think, but it sounded like it was coming through an old radio. The kind that crackles. He offered double, full service, no questions. I said yes. Of course I did. The cold was killing me. I got in. I never saw his face. Not fully. It was always in shadow. Like the light didn't want to touch him. But his body. Something was wrong. He was tall, yes. Very tall. But his head hung like it was badly stitched onto his neck. He moved weird, like someone trying on a body for the first time. He didn't say anything on the drive. Just one thing. Don't look into my eyes. If you see them, you see what came before the world. I thought he was just another religious nut. I've had worse. Worse that leave bruises or skip payment, but this was different. The room wasn't a hotel. It was a warehouse. Inside it smelled like rotten things, but sweet, like a corpse soaked in syrup. There were black candles in every corner, and in the middle, a metal bed with straps and a mirror covered with a sheet soaked in something that still dripped. He told me to turn around, so I did, and that's when I started to feel something else in the room. It wasn't him. It was footsteps. Tiny, quick footsteps. Lots of them. Like something walking on the walls. And the air tined thick. Heavy. Like breathing through someone else's lung. Like the room itself was chewing on you. He touched my shoulder. Cold. Like metal left out in winter. He spoke into my ear, but his breath came from my navel. Now look. I didn't want to. I wasn't going to. But I felt fingers forcing my face, like claws. Like each nail had its own beating heart. And when I looked, God, he didn't have eyes. He had mouths. Mouths that didn't speak. They chewed. Inside his sockets were teeth. Tongues, some human, others like insects have. And in one of those mouths, I saw my face. My face, being bitten. He looked at me with those not eyes and said, "You've been here before. This is the 3rd attempt." I blacked out. When I woke up, I was alone, but my body
wasn't the same. There were marks, like I'd been opened, but no wounds, like I'd been opened from the inside without breaking the skin. And since then, I hear things, voices in my head, and I'm hungry for things I don't have names for. Today I licked a window covered in dried blood, and I liked it. I don't know how much time I have left before I'm no longer me. If you see a black truck, no plates, with windows that are too dark.
If you're enjoying these dark tales and want more, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to Shadows of Fear, and share your thoughts in the comments. Every bit of support helps us keep exploring the unknown together. Come, be part of this community, and don't miss a single story. Now, let's continue.
I don't even know where to start. It's just, I'm shaking. Seriously, I can't stop. I don't usually talk about these things. Never. But now, I don't know what to do anymore. My name is Carmen, but you don't need to look for me. I'm not in Valencia or anywhere. I'm somewhere I don't know, and if they look for me, they won't find me. Or at least, that's what I want to believe. This thing that happened to me, it's not normal. It's not from this world. I swear. I work at a dive bar in downtown Valencia. Don't think it's some fancy place or anything. It's a dump where people come to drink their lives away in shots and forget everything. I do what I can, and sometimes I keep company, you know. But that night wasn't like the others. It was a nightmare, and I don't know if it's real or just some devil's dream. It all started when a guy came in, almost at closing time. Tall, thin, wearing a black trench coat that dragged behind him. And eyes, God, eyes that seemed to look right through me, but not with curiosity. More like he already knew me, like he'd been waiting for me. He sat at the bar, ordered a whiskey neat, and stared at me without saying a word, until I got close to ask if he wanted anything else. He didn't answer, just pointed to the small office at the back of the bar. I froze, mouth open, not knowing what to say, but something in his gaze made me follow him. We went into the office, and he shut the door with a sharp click that chilled my blood. He turned his back to me and started murmuring words I couldn't understand, in a language that sounded ancient, like whispers of stones and dead trees. I tried to leave, but the door was sealed somehow. I turned around and saw his face had changed. He wasn't a normal man anymore. His skin looked translucent, and underneath I could see veins glowing with an eerie blue light. I started screaming, banging on the door, but it was useless. Then he spoke with a voice that wasn't his own, but 1,000 voices together, like a choir of lost souls. Carmen, you're not afraid because you don't understand yet. What do you want from me? I managed to stammer. I've come to give you the truth, to show you what you really are. And at that moment, everything began to darken. I felt like my body was separating from me, like I was floating above, seeing everything from outside myself. The office turned into a dark forest, an endless forest with twisted trees that had eyes watching us. The man, or whatever he was, stretched out his hands, and from the ground rose figures of light, transparent specters that came close and brushed my skin with their icy fingers. "These are the souls searching for you," he said. "Who am I?" I asked, voice breaking. "You're the guardian, the one who crosses between worlds, the one who can open the door that separates life and death." I didn't understand anything, but I felt paralyzing fear. I tried to scream, but my mouth wouldn't respond. The souls swirled around me, whispering in forgotten tongues, and one of them touched my forehead. It was like an electric shock, and then I saw my past, my present, and my future, all at once. I saw the women who had come before me, all with open eyes, all trapped between that invisible line dividing the living from the dead. I saw the dead who walk among us, whispering in the shadows, feeding on fear and loneliness. I saw the door, a stone door covered with strange symbols, and me, holding the key. I woke up in the office, the door open and the man gone. I ran out into the street, and I swear people looked at me weird, like they knew I wasn't the same anymore. Since then, every night I hear voices. They're not human, they're whispers calling me. They say the door is opening, that I have to cross, that I can't say no. I've tried to talk to someone, but no one believes me. They say I'm crazy, that it's the alcohol, the drugs, or just the life I lead. But I know the truth. I know I'm trapped on an invisible threshold, and soon I'll have to choose. Stay here, lost among shadows, or cross and never come back. I don't know if I'm alive or dead, and if anyone hears this, please don't go near that bar. Don't trust the looks, because behind the eyes, sometimes there's an abyss waiting to swallow us whole. The time is coming, Carmen. Please, no, don't take me. Don't go near it. And if it offers double, charge triple, and run. You were bitten by the eyes. Now you see like we do.
If you're enjoying these dark tales and want more, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to Shadows of Fear, and share your thoughts in the comments. Every bit of support helps us keep exploring the unknown together. Come, be part of this community, and don't miss a single story. Now, let's continue. The storm raged outside, with flashes of lightning briefly illuminating the old house where Lucia lived. That night, she and her two best friends, Mariana and Sofia, had gathered to spend time together, as they often did. The trio shared a fascination for the dark and macabre, an interest that their classmates considered weird. Dressed in black, with tall boots, heavy makeup, and inverted crucifix necklaces, they seemed to embody the very mystery they admired. On the dining table lay tarot cards, a lit black candle, and an old Ouija board Lucia had found in an antique shop weeks earlier. Mariana, always the most eager to explore the supernatural, fidgeted with a silver ring as she spoke. "Have you heard of Veronica?" she asked with a sly smile. Sophia raised an eyebrow, adjusting the straps of her black corset. "Another one of your creepy stories?" she replied mockingly, though neither she nor Lucia could resist the lure of Mariana's tales. Lucia shifted in her chair, smoothing her velvet skirt. They say she was a girl who died during a Ouija session. Some versions claim scissors flew across the room and stabbed her. Others say she was struck by a chair. But the interesting part is what happens next. Mariana leaned closer, the flickering candlelight reflecting off her ring. If you say her name in front of a mirror, holding a Bible and a pair of open scissors, her spirit appears behind you. And if she doesn't like you, well, you can imagine. Sophia frowned, though her eyes glimmered with intrigue. And if she does like us? She quipped nervously. Lucia stood, her excitement evident. Why don't we find out? Minutes later, the three stood in the upstairs bathroom, a small space with antique tiles and an enormous mirror framed in tarnished gold. Mariana held the Bible, a dusty relic from her grandmother's library, while Sophia clutched a pair of open scissors in her lace-gloved hand. "This is so stupid," Sophia muttered, though her trembling voice betrayed her unease. Lucia, however, was practically glowing with anticipation as she adjusted the rings on her fingers. Mariana placed the Bible, open, on the sink and took a deep breath. 3 times, looking into the mirror. The black candle Lucia held cast unsettling shadows on the walls. "Ready?" No one answered, but Mariana began anyway. "Veronica, Veronica." On the third utterance, her voice wavered slightly. "Veronica." For a moment, nothing happened. The storm outside seemed to quiet, and the silence in the bathroom grew heavy. Sophia exhaled in relief, lowering the scissors. "See? Just another dumb." Lucia's words froze in her throat, her gaze locked on the mirror. "Don't move." The reflections in the mirror weren't normal. Mariana's reflection grinned, though her real face remained expressionless. Lucia's image tilted its head as if listening to something the others couldn't hear. Behind Sophia, a blurry figure began to take shape in the corner of the mirror. "What is that?" Sophia whispered, her voice barely audible. The figure slowly sharpened into focus, a young woman with disheveled hair and a white dress stained with blood. Her face twisted in anger, and her pale, skeletal hands clutched scissors identical to the ones Sophia held. "It's Veronica!" Lucia screamed, stumbling backward into the door, which refused to budge. The bathroom was filled with an unbearable cold, and the candle's flame flickered violently. In the mirror, Veronica's figure smiled, raising her scissors. The girl's reflections began moving independently, pounding against the glass as though trying to escape. "Do something!" Sophia shouted, but Mariana stood frozen. The scissors in her hands trembled uncontrollably, and the Bible slipped from the sink onto the floor with a dull thud, falling open to an unreadable page. A guttural voice echoed through the bathroom. "Who summoned me?" The voice came from everywhere and nowhere at once. In the mirror, Veronica stepped closer but remained trapped within the glass. Then Lucia screamed, "She's behind us!" The candle extinguished, plunging the bathroom into darkness. Only the sounds of screams, a heavy thud, and the tearing of something sharp could be heard. At dawn, Lucia's parents found the bathroom empty. The mirror, now whole, bore 3 words scrawled in what looked like blood. "They called me." On the floor, the scissors were embedded in the tiles, and the open Bible revealed a single highlighted phrase: "He who summons must pay the price." To this day, they say that anyone who dares speak Veronica's name in front of a mirror will see not only the girl, but also 3 shadowy figures lurking behind her, watching from the other side. If you're enjoying these dark tales and want more, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to Shadows of Fear, and share your thoughts in the comments. Every bit of support helps us keep exploring the unknown together. Come, be part of this community, and don't miss a single story. Now, let's continue.
I am a journalist, and though I don't believe in superstitions, some stories leave such a profound mark that they are impossible to ignore. This is the story of Ayane Nakamura, a woman I met during an investigation whose experience transformed my skepticism into pure fear. Ayane was unforgettable. Tall, with a delicate build but a magnetic presence. Her face, flawless and pale as porcelain, was framed by jet black hair cascading in perfect waves over her shoulders. Her style was as bold as her beauty. Velvet corsets hugging her figure, black lace skirts grazing her thighs, fishnet stockings leading down to towering stiletto heels that resonated with every step. Ayane carried an air of mystery, harboring secrets dark and deep. We met for the first time in a cafe. Her gaze, a blend of exhaustion and terror, captivated me immediately. She agreed to share her story on the condition of anonymity, though now it no longer matters. Everything began with a phone call. One rainy night, while applying makeup in front of a large mirror framed by dim lights, her phone rang with an unfamiliar tone. The number was unknown, but curiosity overcame instinct. "Moshi Moshi?" She answered softly but cautiously. There was no one on the other end, only an oppressive silence, finally broken by a whisper. Ayane couldn't understand the words, but the most unsettling part was how the call ended, with a blood-curdling scream, an echo that lingered in her mind even after she hung up. She checked her call log, but there was no trace of it. It was as if it had never happened. She thought it was a misunderstanding or a cruel prank, until days later, one of her closest friends, Mayumi, received a similar call. This time the message was clear: "You will die in 3 days." Terrified, Mayumi shared this with Ayane, who tried to reassure her, insisting it was just a twisted joke. 3 days later, Ayane received the news that Mayumi was dead. She was found in her apartment, her face frozen in an expression of absolute terror, her phone still in her hand. No one could explain the circumstances of her death, but Ayane knew it wasn't a coincidence. Things became personal when Ayane herself received a second call. The voice, clearer this time, whispered her name before coldly declaring, "You will die in 5 days." Ayane tried to delete the call, change her number, even destroy her phone, but the eerie tone kept appearing on any nearby device. It was as if the curse was stalking her. With time running out, Ayane decided to investigate. She delved into online forums, scoured old libraries, and contacted supernatural experts. One solid lead pointed her to a similar case of a young woman named Haruka, who had died in nearly identical circumstances years earlier. Rumors suggested that Haruka had been a victim of bullying and, before taking her own life, had sent messages filled with hatred to those who had hurt her, vowing revenge even from beyond the grave. Desperate, Ayane visited the site where Haruka was buried, a forgotten cemetery on the outskirts of Tokyo. The night was cold, and the wind howled with an eerie cadence. Dressed in her usual Gothic attire, but without her characteristic glamour, Ayane walked among the graves, illuminated only by the faint light of her phone. At last, she found Haruka's grave, marked by a weathered epitaph. Ayane, trembling with fear and determination, placed an offering of black flowers and lit a candle. She whispered a prayer, pleading for forgiveness and demanding answers. The air grew heavy, and a translucent figure emerged from the gravestone. It was Haruka, her face twisted with hatred, her empty eyes seeming to pierce Ayane's soul. "Why are you haunting me?" Ayane cried out, her voice breaking with terror. The apparition didn't speak, but extended a skeletal hand toward Ayane. At that moment, Ayane's phone rang again. The familiar tone made her blood run cold. She looked at the screen. It was her own number. When she answered, all she heard was her own voice, whispering. In a desperate act, Ayane smashed the phone and ran out of the cemetery, but the sound of her heels clicking against the wet ground was replaced by an eerie echo that seemed to follow her. Haruka's spirit hadn't stayed behind. 5 days passed since that night, and Ayane stopped responding to my messages. I decided to visit her, but when I arrived at her apartment, the police were already there. Ayane had been found lifeless, her body twisted, her face frozen in an expression of utter terror. Strangely, though her phone had been destroyed, it was still playing that peculiar tone on an endless loop. Since then, I avoid answering calls from unknown numbers. Sometimes, on quiet nights, the echo of that tone resonates in my mind, reminding me that some horror stories are all too real. Stories
If you're enjoying these dark tales and want more, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to Shadows of Fear, and share your thoughts in the comments. Every bit of support helps us keep exploring the unknown together. Come, be part of this community, and don't miss a single story. Now, let's continue. I met her in a dark, cozy cafe where the shadows seemed to whisper secrets to each other. Amalia, a girl with jet black hair cascading to her waist, always dressed with impeccable Gothic style. That afternoon, she wore a fitted velvet corset in deep purple, paired with a long black lace skirt that brushed the floor with every step. Her tall boots, adorned with silver buckles, echoed on the cafe's wooden floor, and her neck was framed by a choker featuring a cameo that seemed to belong to another era. But what stood out the most were her eyes, large, deep, outlined with meticulous precision, shimmering with a mix of melancholy and mystery. Beside her sat her inseparable sister, Isabella, identical in every way, though with a darker aura. Where Amalia seemed introspective, Isabella was sharper, wielding a biting sense of humor as a shield. Both were Gothic to their core, but there was something else about them, something that set them apart from everyone else in our circle. I didn't understand it at first, but soon I would discover their lives were intertwined with a tragedy far beyond imagination. It was during one of our conversations that they first told me about their mother. According to them, she was an obsessively protective woman, someone who never let them leave without ensuring they were safe. It's understandable, I suppose, Amalia said, stirring her tea slowly. But sometimes I feel she carries a pain that isn't ours. What do you mean? I asked, intrigued. Isabella chimed in, leaning her elbows on the table and fixing her gaze on me. We weren't always just us, you know? There were two others before. The confession left me stunned. They both looked at me with an unsettling calm, as if they were sharing a secret long locked away. Our mother had another set of twins, Amalia continued, her voice barely a whisper. They died years ago, run over by a truck. A chill ran down my spine. I wanted to ask more, but something in their expressions told me not to push further. A few days later, Amalia invited me to accompany them to the cemetery. It was a place they visited often, and though I initially found it strange, I agreed. We arrived at sunset when the sky was painted in reddish hues and shadows began to stretch. Amalia and Isabella seemed entirely at ease in that setting. Amalia wore a black Victorian-style dress with long sleeves and a corset that accentuated her slender figure. Isabella, on the other hand, opted for something simpler, a black blouse with lace details and a leather skirt that reached her knees. Both wore wide-brimmed hats, giving them an ethereal, almost unreal air. We stopped in front of a weathered tombstone. I didn't need to ask to know it belonged to the first twins. Amalia knelt, placing a bouquet of black roses on the grave. "Sometimes I feel like they're watching us," she said, breaking the silence. Isabella nodded. "They're not just watching. They're here." I didn't know what to say. There was something in the way they spoke, a certainty I couldn't ignore. It all began a few weeks later. We were walking together through a park when Amalia stopped abruptly, gripping my arm tightly. "Did you hear that?" she asked, her face pale. "Hear what?" I replied, confused. "The screeching brakes," she whispered. I hadn't heard anything, but Amalia was convinced she had. Isabella, walking a few steps ahead, turned with a worried expression. "Again," she said, as if it were something familiar. I didn't understand what was happening, but I decided not to press the matter. However, that night, as I said goodbye to them, I saw something that froze me in place. Two figures, identical to Amalia and Isabella, reflected in a nearby window. The strange thing was that, though they were facing away from me, the figures in the glass were staring directly at me. It was during a nighttime visit to the cemetery that I finally began to understand what was happening. Amalia and Isabella were determined to confront whatever was tormenting them. "We can't keep ignoring it," Amalia said as we walked among the graves. "Our mother always wanted to protect us, but she can't protect us from them," Isabella added. They led me to the same gravestone we had visited before, but this time something was different. There were fresh marks in the dirt, as if someone had been digging recently. "They're angry," Amalia whispered. "They think we replaced them." Suddenly, the air grew icy. The shadows around us seemed to shift, and a faint sound, like screeching brakes, echoed in the distance. "What do we do?" I asked, fear creeping into my voice. "We don't know," Isabella replied, her voice trembling. That night, something changed in them. Though we continued to see each other, there was a growing distance, an invisible barrier I couldn't cross. Eventually, they stopped responding to my messages, and when I went to find them, I discovered their house was empty. I never found out what happened to them. Sometimes I think about them. Their impeccable Gothic style, their dark secrets, and the tragedy that seemed to follow them. And every time I pass that cemetery, I can't shake the feeling that something is watching me from the shadows. Something that bears the faces of Amalia and Isabella, but isn't them. If you're enjoying these dark tales and want more, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to Shadows of Fear, and share your thoughts in the comments. Every bit of support helps us keep exploring the unknown together. Come, be part of this community, and don't miss a single story. Now, let's continue. Death is not the end, or at least, that's what I've come to believe over time. I'm not a philosopher or a spiritualist, but death and I have always been close, like old acquaintances who never quite lose touch. When I was just 6 years old, a fire claimed the lives of my cousins, Daniela and Camila. They lived with my grandparents in that enormous house that always smelled of dust and sadness. My cousins were the light of that somber home. But their deaths left my Aunt Irma trapped in a darkness she never escaped. After the fire, Aunt Irma insisted I live with her. "We'll keep each other company," she would say. I had lost my parents a year earlier in a car accident, and she had lost everything. Loneliness brought us together. We lived in a small house on the outskirts of town. It was quiet, but the silence was heavy, almost oppressive. Even so, I was grateful not to live in my grandparents' house anymore, a place I always felt was a void full of shadows. My grandfather Pedro was a terrible man, violent, cruel and always accompanied by an aura of barely contained rage. My father used to say the house itself was a reflection of his character, cold, loveless, and full of dark corners where secrets and fears lurked. When my grandfather died, I was 13. They found him in his favorite armchair, the television still on, with an old black and white comedy flick flickering on the screen. Aunt Irma said he didn't look like a dead man, but rather someone deeply satisfied with himself. That damn smile of his, that smirk that seemed to mock the entire world, was frozen on his face. In time, we stopped talking about him. His memory was like an infected wound, best left untouched. But now we come to the part that keeps me awake at night. Years after my grandfather's death, my cousin Tomas was born. From the beginning, he was a peculiar child. By the time he was 2, he insisted we call him Pedro, as if his real name didn't belong to him. No one told him anything about our grandfather, not even that they shared a name. Tomas was different, not in the way that makes children special, but in a way that unsettles you. He was cruel, deliberately so. Animals feared him, his schoolmates avoided him. Aunt Irma, though she would never admit it, was afraid of him. One day, I found him sitting in the living room armchair, chewing on a dry twig with that smile. That damn smile I remembered so vividly, even though it had been years since I'd last seen it. "What are you doing here in the dark, Tomas?" I asked, but he didn't answer. He just stared at me, chewing on the twig and smiling as if he knew something I didn't. After that day, the family began to talk. My grandmother claimed she heard Tomas talking to himself at night, sometimes even laughing. She said she occasionally saw shadows moving through the house when she knew everyone else was asleep. The breaking point came just a month ago. My grandmother woke up in the middle of the night, feeling someone's eyes on her. When she opened her eyes, she saw him. Tomas was standing in the doorway to her room, smiling. "Grandma," he said in a voice that wasn't his own, deeper, harsher. "You know who I am." She wanted to scream but couldn't. She could only watch as he nodded slowly before disappearing into the shadows of the hallway. Since that night, my grandmother hasn't slept. Neither have I, because I've started to believe that death isn't always the end, that maybe some souls don't leave entirely, that maybe some come back, and not always with good intentions. If you're enjoying these dark tales and want more, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to Shadows of Fear, and share your thoughts in the comments. Every bit of support helps us keep exploring the unknown together. Come, be part of this community, and don't miss a single story. Now, let's continue. When I moved into this house, I was seeking peace. The place had everything I needed: silence, space, and just enough distance from the chaos of the city. It was an old house with high ceilings and an air reminiscent of those classic horror films you see on TV. If I had known what awaited me, I would never have crossed that door. The first night passed uneventfully. I spent hours unpacking boxes and dusting off furniture when, just after midnight, someone knocked on the door. The sound was clear and deliberate, 3 firm knocks. Puzzled, I opened the door, not expecting visitors. In front of me stood a young woman. Her face was beautiful, though marred by exhaustion and something else I couldn't quite identify at the time. She wore a black spaghetti-strap dress, tight and worn, falling to her knees, with a weathered leather jacket over it. Her thin legs were clad in torn black tights, and her feet were tucked into heavy boots. Her dark brown hair fell in messy strands over her face, and a bold red lipstick stood out starkly against her pale skin. "Sorry to bother you so late," she said softly, her voice trembling. "Can I come in? My husband, he hit me, and I have nowhere else to go." I couldn't say no. Her split lip and the faint bruise on her left cheekbone erased any hesitation. I offered her the couch in the living room. She thanked me with a faint smile and settled in. I went to bed, uneasy but convinced I'd done the right thing. The next morning, when I woke up, she was gone. There was no trace of her. Not even the blanket I'd given her was out of place. I wondered how she'd left without me hearing, but I didn't dwell on it too much. Yet, that night, she came back. The same knocks on the door, just as firm, just as insistent. She was there again, this time with a black eye and chapped lips. Her outfit was nearly identical, though it seemed even more worn, as if she hadn't had the chance to change. I let her in once more. She sat on the couch, arms crossed as though shielding herself from something unseen. "I'm so sorry for bothering you," she said, staring at the floor. "I just need a safe place." I assured her it was fine and that she could stay as long as she needed. Yet deep down, I felt uneasy. There was something strange about her behavior. The way she never got too close, as if she didn't want to invade my space more than necessary. I went to bed, trying to ignore the nagging feeling. At dawn, she was gone again. This pattern repeated for 3 more nights. Each time she came, her appearance grew more disheveled, her injuries deeper. But what unsettled me the most was her silence. After her initial explanation, she barely spoke. She would just sit on the couch, staring at the floor, as though waiting for something that never arrived. By the 4th day, my curiosity turned into concern. I decided to find her husband and confront him. I asked the neighbors about her, but no one seemed to know who I was talking about. Some looked at me like I was crazy, others simply ignored me. Desperate, I went to the police. I needed help. At the station, I explained everything to the officer on duty. He listened patiently, but when I mentioned the woman's name, Akane, his expression changed. It was clear he recognized the story. Slowly, he stood from his chair and rummaged through a dusty file cabinet. He pulled out an envelope containing several photos. "Is this the woman who's been coming to your house?" he asked, sliding a photo across the desk. A chill ran down my spine. Yes, it was her. The hair, the face, even the leather jacket, everything matched. "What's going on? Did you find her?" I asked, my voice tense with unease. The officer sighed and leaned toward me, his voice heavy with gravity. "That woman died a year ago. Her husband killed her in that house, strangled her, then fled. We never caught him, but she's dead." I sat there in stunned silence, unable to process what I'd just heard. It made no sense. I'd seen her. I'd spoken to her. Just last night, she'd been on my couch. "There must be some mistake," I insisted, though my voice wavered. The officer shook his head and pulled out another photo, this time of the inside of my house. It was the living room, my couch, but stained with dried blood. At that moment, a memory surfaced in my mind. The previous nights, there had always been a strange smell in the room, like dampness, but I'd never paid it much attention. That night, I returned home feeling trapped in a nightmare. When I entered, the air was icy. The couch was empty, but shadows seemed to shift in the dark corners of the living room. Suddenly, the knocking came again. 3 firm, insistent knocks. I didn't open the door. I couldn't. I stood frozen in the middle of the room as the knocks grew louder, more desperate. Then I heard her voice. "Please let me in. He's here." I still don't know if she meant her husband or something worse. I didn't open the door that night or ever again. But sometimes in the quiet of the night, I still hear those 3 knocks, an echo of the past that refuses to fade away. If you're enjoying these dark tales and want more, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to Shadows of Fear, and share your thoughts in the comments. Every bit of support helps us keep exploring the unknown together. Come, be part of this community, and don't miss a single story. Now, let's continue. That Friday seemed like any other night. We had decided to meet at my house, as we often did, to chat and share a pizza. We were a close-knit group of friends, bonded for years. Among us was Hero, a peculiar guy, always drawn to the spiritual, the unknown, things most of us found too strange to take seriously. But that night, Hero showed us something none of us were prepared to face. The evening began calmly. We gathered around the table, the pizza arrived on time, and the conversations flowed as usual. Hero was quieter than usual, but we didn't think much of it. He said he'd had an exhausting day at work and just needed to relax. But soon, he started sweating and complaining of a sharp headache. "Are you okay?" I asked, setting my glass down on the table. "I just need a moment," he replied in a strained voice, getting up from the table. We watched as he headed to the master bedroom, presumably to rest for a bit. Minutes later, we heard something odd. At first, it was a faint murmur, barely audible, but it soon turned into laughter. A laughter that was anything but human, deep, guttural, and as if it came from someone else entirely. We froze. "What the hell?" one of my friends muttered, staring toward the hallway. A chill ran down my spine. Something was terribly wrong. I stood up to check on him, but halfway down the hall, the laughter stopped abruptly. For a moment, the silence was so heavy it felt as if even the air had stopped moving. I cautiously opened the bedroom door, and what I saw left me speechless. Hero stood in the center of the room, swaying from side to side with strange, puppet-like movements. His face was tense, and though his eyes were open, his pupils had vanished, leaving only a milky white. He began laughing again, that same unnerving, otherworldly laughter that seemed to emanate from somewhere dark and unfathomable. "Hero!" I shouted, but he didn't respond. I bolted back to the living room, trembling. My wife and the others stared at me, expecting an explanation, but before I could say anything, Hero emerged from the hallway. He walked slowly, dragging his feet, as if each step required immense effort. "He wants to talk to you," he said, pointing a shaky finger at me. My wife went pale as paper. No one said a word, but I felt I couldn't refuse. I returned to the bedroom, even though every instinct screamed at me to stay away. Inside, Hero stood by the window. When he heard me enter, he turned slowly. His face was eerily serene, almost as if he no longer belonged to the living world. He walked toward me with deliberate steps. When he stopped in front of me, he let out a low growl and uttered words that haunt me to this day. "This is my house." The room instantly grew cold. I tried to speak, but my throat was dry. Without warning, Hero dropped to his knees before me. My body was paralyzed as he grabbed my feet and kissed them with a strange reverence, as if enacting some ancient ritual. Then he raised a hand and placed it over my stomach, moving it gently as if cradling something invisible, something I couldn't see but that he clearly felt. "What are you doing?" I managed to ask, my voice trembling. He didn't answer. He continued in silence, cradling the invisible presence, until the house phone suddenly rang. The sound shattered the trance, and Hero collapsed to the floor, gasping for air. His eyes returned to normal, and when he looked up at me, he seemed utterly confused. "What happened?" he asked, his voice shaking. I couldn't find the words to respond. The room felt charged with an unsettling energy, as if something or someone was still there, watching us. For weeks, I couldn't shake the memory of that night. Then, a month later, my wife gave me unexpected news. She was pregnant. I remembered how Hero had touched my stomach, as if he had known before we did. The thought sent chills down my spine. I tried talking to Hero about what had happened, but he avoided the subject. He claimed to remember nothing and insisted he didn't want to know. I didn't press him. There was something too disturbing about it all. The most unsettling part came later. I discovered that the house's previous owner had died suddenly 8 months earlier, in the same bedroom where Hero's strange behavior occurred. The thought made my skin crawl. Since then, I've been unable to shake the feeling that some presence still lingers here, watching, waiting, claiming what it believes is rightfully its own. This is my house. Those words still echo in my mind. If you're enjoying these dark tales and want more, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to Shadows of Fear, and share your thoughts in the comments. Every bit of support helps us keep exploring the unknown together. Come, be part of this community, and don't miss a single story. Now, let's continue.
It all started with a letter. A yellowed sheet written in crooked handwriting that arrived unexpectedly at Lena's house. I remember the day she showed me the envelope. She, with her impeccable Gothic style, seemed more intrigued than alarmed. But that was her way. Always searching for mystery, always drawn to darkness. Lena was different. Her jet black hair fell in straight strands down to her waist, contrasting with her pale, almost translucent skin. Her eyes, framed by smoky makeup, seemed like bottomless pits, always pensive, always slightly sorrowful. That afternoon, she wore a black velvet dress, fitted at the torso and with sleeves that spread like raven's wings. Around her neck, she had an onyx pendant shaped like a teardrop, and on her wrists, a series of lace and leather bracelets. Her appearance wasn't an act. Lena was goth incarnate, a living enigma in a gray city. "It's a chain letter?" she said as she held the paper carefully, as if afraid it would crumble in her hands. The message was simple. Reply to this letter or face the consequences. If you choose to respond, follow the instructions that will be sent. I laughed, as anyone would. "It's just nonsense. Throw it away," I told her. But Lena didn't. A few days later, I got a message from her. I replied to the letter, she wrote. I couldn't help it. I felt like I had to. That's when things started happening. A few days after she sent the response, her friend Angela, a classmate from university, was found dead in her apartment. The official diagnosis was a heart attack, something extremely rare for a 22-year-old. Lena was devastated, but there was something else. Fear. "Do you think it's related to the letter?" I asked when we met at a cafe. She nodded, biting her black painted lip. "I know it is. Since I replied, I feel like something is around me, like I'm being watched, like it's waiting." Over time, the deaths continued. First, Carlos, her upstairs neighbor, died in an inexplicable accident, falling down the stairs. Then Marta, a childhood friend, crashed her car into a tree on a straight road. Every time someone close to Lena died, her expression grew darker. "I'm sure it's the letter," she told me one day as we walked through a park blanketed with autumn leaves. She wore a long black wool cloak with a hood that barely revealed her face. "It's like they're paying for my mistake." "Why don't you report it?" I suggested. She looked at me with a bitter smile. "And what would I say? That a letter is killing the people I care about? No one would understand." Lena became obsessed with solving the mystery. She confessed to me that she'd received a second message after replying to the letter. It was even more cryptic. "Find my body, and the chains will break." That was the first time I accompanied her to the cemetery. Lena had become a shadow of herself, thinner, paler, as if the weight of the deaths was draining the life from her. That night, she wore a black lace dress that seemed to meld with the darkness, tall boots with metal buckles, and a velvet cloak that made her look like a figure out of a horror story. The cemetery was deserted, shrouded in thick fog that muffled all sound. Lena carried a small flashlight, but its beam barely illuminated the names on the old headstones. "What exactly are we looking for?" I asked, feeling the cold seep through my coat. "I don't know," she replied without looking at me. "Just something." We spent hours walking among the graves, stopping to examine names that meant nothing to us. Lena murmured incomprehensible things, as if speaking to someone I couldn't see. "Are you okay?" I asked, but she didn't answer. The visits to the cemetery became frequent. Each time I saw her, Lena seemed more obsessed, more consumed by something I couldn't understand. She began carrying a journal where she jotted down names, dates, and strange symbols. "I think I'm close," she told me one day. Her lips were chapped, and her eyes gleamed feverishly. "Close to what?" "To her." She never told me who she meant, but I knew she was talking about the letter. It was on an especially cold night that Lena finally found what she was looking for. We were in an abandoned section of the cemetery, where the gravestones were moss-covered and nearly illegible. "Here," she said, pointing to a nameless grave. It bore only a date, 1876. "What does it mean?" I asked. She knelt, placing her hands on the cold stone. "This is where she is. I know it." She pulled a small knife from her bag and began digging. I tried to stop her, but her determination was unshakable. Suddenly, she stopped. There was something in the dirt, an old, rotting wooden box. Lena carefully opened it. Inside was a yellowed piece of paper, identical to the letter she had received. "It's her," she whispered as the wind began to howl. Suddenly, a blood-curdling scream filled the air. Lena collapsed, and for a moment I thought she was dead. But then, with a shuddering breath, she opened her eyes. "It's over," she said in a voice barely above a whisper. Lena never spoke about what happened that night. I didn't push her, though I knew something had changed in her. The death stopped, but the Lena I knew never truly returned. Now, every time I pass the cemetery, I feel an unsettling presence, as though something is watching me from the shadows. And though I've never said it out loud, I'm certain Lena left part of herself behind that night, with that forgotten grave.
If you're enjoying these dark tales and want more, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to Shadows of Fear, and share your thoughts in the comments. Every bit of support helps us keep exploring the unknown together. Come, be part of this community, and don't miss a single story. Now, let's continue. The cabin stood isolated, hidden deep among trees in a forest absent from any map. Samuel and his group of friends had chosen it for their weekend getaway, enticed by the promise of total disconnection. No cell service, no electricity, just them, a fireplace, and the ghost stories they planned to share that night. From the start, something about the cabin felt wrong. In the basement, there was a trapdoor secured with multiple rusted chains and heavy padlocks. Carved into the wood above it were the words, "Never open." Naturally, the warning only fueled their curiosity. "What do you think is down there?" Claudia asked nervously, staring at the chains. "Probably an old generator or some junk from the last owners," Javier replied with a shrug. Samuel wasn't so sure. There was something about that trapdoor that set him on edge, as though something on the other side was watching them. That night, curiosity won over caution. Armed with a crowbar, they broke through the padlocks one by one. With each snap of the metal, a hollow echo reverberated through the cabin like the beating of a distant heart. Finally, the trapdoor creaked open, revealing a staircase descending into complete darkness. An unbearable stench wafted up from below, a sickly mixture of sourness, dried blood, decayed flesh, and something unidentifiable. "This is a bad idea," Claudia murmured, but Javier had already switched on his flashlight. "Don't be a coward," he said, taking the first steps down. The others hesitated, but eventually followed, Samuel bringing up the rear with a growing sense of dread pressing against his chest. The basement was small and damp, its stone walls coated in patches of black mold. In the center stood a metal table littered with rusted tools, knives, saws, and hooks. But what truly caught their attention was a cage in the corner, large enough to hold a human. Inside the cage, something shuddered. "Is it an animal?" Andrea whispered, taking a step back. Javier aimed his flashlight at the cage. The light revealed a hunched figure, its body stripped of skin, exposing raw, twitching muscle. It shuddered as if breathing with great effort. Its sunken, glassy eyes swiveled toward them. Then it spoke. "Too late," it rasped, its guttural voice scraping like metal on stone. The group froze, unable to process what they were seeing. Samuel was the first to move, stumbling back toward the stairs. Suddenly, the trapdoor slammed shut above them with a deafening thud. A wet, squelching sound filled the room. They turned back to the cage to see the figure now standing, its elongated, deformed hands gripping the bars. The flesh on its fingers writhed as though alive. "Hunger," it growled, and with a sharp, metallic snap, the cage's chains gave way. What followed was chaos, a blur of screams and blood. The creature moved with inhuman speed, pouncing on Javier first. Its jagged, distorted teeth tore into his neck, ripping away flesh with a sickening crunch Samuel would never forget. Claudia shrieked as blood sprayed across the walls. She tried to run for the stairs but slipped in the spreading crimson pool, falling hard. Before she could scramble to her feet, the creature was on her, its clawed hands tearing into her abdomen. Her organs spilled onto the floor as the creature devoured them ravenously. Samuel and Andrea reached the stairs, scrambling up in blind panic. The trapdoor wouldn't budge. Below, the wet crunch of bones and muffled screams filled the air. "Help me open it!" Andrea yelled, pounding on the wood with frantic fists. The creature appeared at the base of the stairs, its glowing, unnatural eyes fixed on them. It climbed slowly, dragging behind it a length of intestine that dangled from its bloodied maw. In desperation, Samuel hurled the flashlight, striking the creature's face. It didn't flinch. With a guttural roar, it lunged at Andrea, yanking her down by her ankles. Andrea's screams dissolved into wet gurgles as the creature sank its teeth into her face, peeling away the skin like paper. Paralyzed with fear, Samuel watched as his friend was reduced to a grotesque heap of flesh and shattered bones. Suddenly, the trapdoor creaked open. Moonlight spilled into the basement, and Samuel scrambled through the opening, slamming the door shut behind him. He bolted toward the cabin's entrance, but froze when he heard a faint whisper. "Hunger never ends." Samuel fled into the woods, running aimlessly until his legs gave out. By dawn, the police found him, soaked in blood and babbling incoherently about a creature that fed on human flesh. When authorities searched the cabin, they found it empty. In the basement, the cage stood intact, its bars unbroken. In the corner, they discovered a mound of clean, white bones piled high. The trapdoor was resealed, but locals claim that on cold nights, if you pass by the cabin, you can still hear faint knocks and whispers from below. And always the same word: hunger. If you're enjoying these dark tales and want more, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to Shadows of Fear, and share your thoughts in the comments. Every bit of support helps us keep exploring the unknown together. Come, be part of this community, and don't miss a single story. Now, let's continue. It was a moonless night, the kind of darkness that seems to devour everything in its path. Lara and Tomas, a pair of teenagers craving adventure, decided to spend the evening exploring a remote forest, a place shrouded in strange legends. "Are you sure this is a good idea?" Lara asked as Tomas drove down the winding dirt road. "It'll just be for a little while. Nobody comes here. It'll be fun," he replied with a smile meant to inspire confidence. The forest loomed ahead, towering and silent, its trees so tall and dense they seemed to form an impenetrable wall. They parked beside a clearing, the car surrounded by impenetrable blackness. Tomas killed the engine, and for a moment the only sound was the creak of the trees swaying in a cold, gentle breeze. To lighten the mood, Tomas turned on the radio, but only static crackled through the speakers. "No signal here?" Lara asked, but before Tomas could answer, a strange sound interrupted their thoughts. It was like a wail, a muffled murmur that seemed to come from somewhere deep in the forest. "Did you hear that?" Lara asked, sitting upright in her seat. Tomas frowned, straining to listen. "Probably an animal," he said, though his voice faltered, betraying his own uncertainty. The sound continued, a repetitive whisper, as though someone were calling his name. "Tomas, let's get out of here," Lara pleaded. But he, more intent on impressing her than heeding his own instincts, grabbed a flashlight from the trunk. "Stay here. I'm just going to take a quick look," he said as he shut the car door behind him. Lara remained in the car, her heart pounding like a drum. She watched through the window, trying to follow the beam of the flashlight, but soon it disappeared among the trees. The whispers grew louder. No longer distant, they seemed to circle her, murmuring from the surrounding darkness. 10 minutes passed, then 20. Lara began calling out through the window, but there was no response. Finally, summoning her courage, she stepped out of the car and took a few hesitant steps toward the forest, every fiber of her being screaming at her to stop. "Tomas, this isn't funny. Come out now," she called, trying to mask her fear. Suddenly, a loud noise shattered the silence. Tomas emerged from the trees, sprinting toward her with the flashlight swinging wildly in his hand. His face was pale, sweat glistened on his forehead, and his eyes were wide with terror Lara had never seen before. "Get in the car, now!" he yelled. "What happened? What did you see?" Lara asked as Tomas scrambled to start the engine. "There's no one," he stammered, his voice shaking. He refused to elaborate. He floored the gas pedal, the headlights barely piercing the leaf-covered path ahead. As they sped away, both felt an oppressive weight in the air, as though something unseen was chasing them. Lara glanced at the rearview mirror and thought she saw movement among the trees, a dark figure following them. "Tomas, drive faster!" she screamed. Finally, they reached the main road and then Lara's house. She hurried out of the car, but as she turned to say goodbye, she froze, her scream slicing through the night. "Tomas!" she cried, pointing to the back of the car. Tomas stepped out, following her gaze. On the trunk were deep, parallel gashes, as though giant claws had raked the metal. But what unnerved them most was the black, viscous substance dripping from the edges onto the ground. "There has to be an explanation," Tomas stammered, though even he didn't believe his own words. He decided to open the trunk, just to be sure. He lifted the lid slowly, Lara watching with bated breath. The trunk was empty. But as Tomas closed it, the sound returned. The whispers. This time, they weren't coming from the forest. They were all around them. They both turned toward the nearest tree and saw it. A tall, gaunt figure with eyes glowing like embers stared at them from the shadows. Tomas reacted instinctively, diving into the car and shouting for Lara to get in. But she didn't move. She stood frozen, as if time had stopped for her. In the end, only the car drove away. Lara's disappearance was the first of many in the area. But what puzzles investigators most is Tomas's account. He swears that every night since that encounter, he hears Lara's name whispered from the forest. If you're enjoying these dark tales and want more, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to Shadows of Fear, and share your thoughts in the comments. Every bit of support helps us keep exploring the unknown together. Come, be part of this community, and don't miss a single story. Now, let's continue. My dad worked for over 30 years driving cargo trucks. He knew most of the country's highways, crossing states, climates, and landscapes that few ever see, all from the solitude of the driver's seat. He experienced everything on the road, good things, many bad, and some that simply can't be explained. Strange apparitions, encounters with the impossible, stories he never wanted to say out loud. But without a doubt, the most macabre thing that ever happened to him took place one night when, coincidentally, he wasn't alone. That time, my younger brother was with him. He was only 9 years old and had dreamed of traveling with my dad for as long as he could remember. For years, he had watched him leave at dawn and return days later with tales of endless roads, lost towns, and distant lights in the night. He had always wanted to be just like him. So when the December holidays arrived and he had the chance to join him on a trip to Coatzacoalcos, he didn't hesitate. It was his first time riding in a big rig, and he was excited. But the journey was long, much longer than my brother had imagined. The trip was rough, full of road accidents that caused delays. By the time they were close to their destination, it was already late at night. The highway was deserted, with only the occasional truck passing in the distance. The engine roared in the silence. The truck's headlights cut through the thick darkness of the road. My brother was already asleep, curled up in the passenger seat. He was exhausted. My dad drove in silence. And then my brother woke up suddenly. My dad noticed his movement and, without taking his eyes off the road, asked if he was okay. But my brother didn't respond. Not right away. He just stared at the rearview mirror, unblinking, eyes wide open. After a few seconds, he spoke in a strange, almost muted tone. "Dad, something got in." A chill ran down my dad's spine. He thought my brother was dreaming, still half asleep. He paid no attention, but the boy insisted, this time in a more unsettling tone. "Dad, there's a woman." The air in the cabin suddenly felt heavier. "What?" my dad asked, keeping his eyes on the road. "She's peeking in." My dad frowned and glanced at the rearview mirror. He saw nothing. "Go back to sleep, son. We're almost there." But my brother didn't move. He kept staring in silence, clutching his seat, breathing very softly. And then his voice broke into a scream. "There she is. She's looking in." This time, my dad couldn't ignore him. He looked in the mirror again, and for an instant he saw something. A shadow, a fleeting reflection, something with long hair that vanished too quickly. The hair on the back of his neck stood on end. There was something at the back of the truck. "Did you see her?" my brother whispered. My dad didn't answer. He didn't want to scare him more. But the feeling in his chest was no longer just nerves. It was fear. He pressed the gas pedal. The miles passed. In the distance, he saw the lights of a gas station. He decided he would check the cargo there, convince himself it was just his imagination, that his son had been dreaming. And then, the wind changed. It didn't sound the same anymore. It was a choppy murmur, like someone whispering in a language that didn't exist. He forced himself to ignore it. He pulled into the gas station, slowing down. A young man, no older than 18, approached to assist them. But his dog? His dog reacted in a way that sent ice through my dad's veins. The animal started barking and howling as if it saw something that shouldn't be there. Something in the truck. The young man frowned. Then he raised his hand and signaled my dad to keep driving. My dad slowed down even more, confused. "What's wrong?" The boy, realizing he didn't understand, ran up to the truck door and grabbed hold with both hands, lifting himself up a little, and his face held the same fear as my brother's. "Keep going, boss. Don't stop." Something got in. A chill ran down my dad's spine. "Who?" "Don't stop, sir. Floor it until you reach the city. Because if you stop..." The boy suddenly let go, and as he ran back, he shouted something else. Something my dad barely managed to hear. "It won't ever let you arrive." My dad didn't think twice. He slammed on the gas. He shot out of there. He didn't look back. He didn't ease up until he saw the lights of Coatzacoalcos in the distance. When he finally arrived at the station, his heart was still pounding in his chest. He got out without saying a word. He walked to the back of the truck with a heavy feeling pressing against his chest. He turned on his flashlight and the beam lit up the metal floor. And then he saw it. Ash. Ash scattered in the back of the truck, as if something had burned there. The workers unloading the cargo said nothing, and if they noticed, they chose to stay silent. My dad never mentioned it either, but that night changed something in my family. My brother never spoke about it again. He never got into a truck again. And he never again mentioned his dream of becoming like my dad. Because that night, somewhere along the road, something climbed in beside them. Something that was never supposed to be there. If you're enjoying these dark tales and want more, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to Shadows of Fear, and share your thoughts in the comments. Every bit of support helps us keep exploring the unknown together. Come, be part of this community, and don't miss a single story. Now, let's continue.
I am a woman of science, someone who believes in facts rather than superstitions, and my work leaves no room for doubts or emotions. I am dedicated to unraveling the secrets of lifeless bodies. My role is to observe, document, and finally close the final chapter of those who can no longer tell their own story. I have spent years in this morgue, enduring endless and solitary shifts, and the routine has become as familiar as breathing. But that night, something shattered the logic that anchored me so firmly. I never imagined that, at the foot of the cold and silent autopsy table, I would begin to question how solid what we consider real truly is. That night, I was alone in the morgue, and the silence was oppressive, thick, as if something invisible was slowly crushing me. It was that kind of silence charged with presences, where even the slightest noise takes on an unsettling depth. I had just finished the reports for a particularly complicated autopsy. The body had arrived that very afternoon, a middle-aged man, a victim of a hit and run. He was so mangled that he barely retained a trace of humanity. I never felt good about these kinds of cases, but after years as a forensic pathologist, I had learned to slip into professional neutrality, to close my eyes to the emotional weight of my work. The clock hands were slowly approaching midnight, and exhaustion was already taking over my thoughts. I crossed the room with the intention of making one last check of the storage units before heading home. The cold of the refrigeration unit greeted me with an almost invigorating touch. As I walked among the perfectly aligned cadaver trays, I noticed something out of place. One of the trays at the back of the room wasn't completely closed. It was ajar by just a few centimeters, enough for a strip of stainless steel to peek through the gap. I felt a chill. Something wasn't right. I remembered checking all the trays, ensuring they were properly closed. I approached carefully, and the low hum of the refrigeration blended with the pounding of my heart, which had begun to quicken. My first thought was that it could be a mechanical failure, a faulty latch. It wouldn't be the first time. The morgue equipment had its imperfections. However, a deep sense of unease began to form in the pit of my stomach as I reached for the tray. I felt the icy cold of the handle before grasping it. Then, something made me stop. I examined the latch and noticed it was forced. The clasp was bent and scratched, as if someone had tried to pry it open with a tool. This wasn't an accident. Someone had been here. But how? I was the only person on the night shift, and all the doors were locked. My heart raced as I tried to rationalize what I saw, but I found no logical explanation. Access was strictly restricted, and yet someone had tampered with the lock. I pushed the tray back in and secured it carefully. Without losing a moment, I headed to the security room at the end of the hall. I entered the access code and examined the camera footage. The room appeared empty throughout the night, still and sterile. The playback seemed normal, but when I reached 11:30, I noticed something that made me hold my breath. A flash of static on the camera, as if the image had been interrupted for a second. I watched the recording more closely. It wasn't enough to be alarming under normal circumstances, but now that slight flicker felt like a hole in reality. Fear began to morph into something deeper, a dense and dark sensation. The room was in total calm, but for some reason, I felt as though I wasn't alone. I slowly returned to the main room, my mind tangled in the images, the camera flicker, and the forced lock. Suddenly, an intense cold swept over me, and a strange silence enveloped the atmosphere, heavier, denser. A slight breeze brushed my skin. I looked around. All the corpses were in their place, every tray closed, every shadow in its spot. And then I heard it. It was a soft whisper, barely perceptible, something that at first might have been mistaken for the buzzing of fluorescent lights. But it wasn't that. It was a faint voice, almost a murmur, coming from the back of the room, from the tray I had found open. A shiver ran down my spine. The voice murmured unintelligible words, something dragged out, as if it did not belong to the world of the living. Against all logic, my legs moved toward the source of the whisper. My breath was shallow, each step resonating like thunder in the morgue's silence. I approached the tray and, almost against my will, extended my hand to open it again. I pulled on the handle, and the tray slowly slid outward. What I saw was so disturbing that my hands began to tremble. There, on the cold stainless steel surface, was the body of the man from the accident, just as I had left it before. But his face was no longer deformed. He was looking directly at me, his eyes open, empty, but fixed on mine, and a strange, faint smile curved his shattered lips. That smile stretched into an impossible grimace. I instinctively recoiled, but tripped and fell to the floor. When I got back up, I noticed that the body had moved slightly, as if it had tried to sit up. His hands, once rigid, now hung over the edges of the tray. A chill raced through me as a muffled, mocking laughter flooded the morgue's air, echoing in every corner, as if it came from every tray, from every shadow. I turned to run, but my legs felt anchored to the ground. I tried to pull away, stumbling and feeling cold sweat trickle down my back. As I reached the door, a final whisper, clear and sharp, cut through the air.
I'll see you tomorrow.
I stumbled out, barely aware of my steps. I reached the security room,
feeling my skin taut and cold, and I turned off the lights in the morgue. Before closing the door, I took one last look into the dark room and saw that the tray was open again. And the smile was still there, waiting for me. Since that night, I have never been alone in the morgue again.
If you're enjoying these dark tales and want more, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to Shadows of Fear, and share your thoughts in the comments. Every bit of support helps us keep exploring the unknown together. Come, be part of this community, and don't miss a single story. Now, let's continue. In the morgue, time seems to stand still, and the echoes of life fade away between the sterile walls where silence reigns supreme. For those of us who work here, death becomes a routine. But that night, something shattered the meticulous calm of my work. A case that appeared to be just another turned into an abyss of unease that threatened to pull me into something darker. As I reviewed the evidence, I began to sense the disturbing presence of a hidden, lurking intention that unsettled my perception of reality. That night, I was alone, sifting through the records of a recent case. A young man, hit in a hit-and-run, had arrived without identification and with barely a few belongings. The police were searching for clues, but the cameras in the area had only captured the fleeing vehicle. As I examined the deceased's clothing, I found something unexpected in the pocket of his jacket. It was a crumpled note. I thought it would be a receipt or worthless trash until I unfolded the paper and read the first words. My name, scrawled in trembling, hurried handwriting, Dr. Samuel. My heart raced. How could a stranger know my name? And what was written in that note struck me like a dagger to the chest. I don't have much time. They know about your family. Lydia, Anna, take care of them. They are watching you. I stepped back, almost dropping the paper. Lydia and Anna were the names of my wife and daughter. Information that no one outside my inner circle could possibly know. The air in the autopsy room grew thick. I looked at the corpse, searching for answers in its vacant face. A man I had never seen in my life, but who seemed to know every detail of mine. I quickly turned to the fingerprint system, searching for a match in the database. The screen flickered, and time seemed to slow as the system processed. In the midst of the wait, I decided to review the case files. What I found was even more disconcerting. The autopsy notes, which I had written myself the night before, were altered. The wounds, the angle of the impact, the description, every detail was subtly changed, just enough to make me doubt my own memory. I called my supervisor, explaining the situation with as much calm as I could muster, though inside I felt a chilling panic. The note, the changes in the report, the sensation of being watched. Something or someone was manipulating every element of this case. We reviewed the security footage from the previous night, searching for any signs of unauthorized access, any hint of activity. To our surprise, the monitors showed absolute emptiness. The cameras had not captured any movement at all. As we watched the recording, I noticed something chilling. At one moment during the autopsy, a shadow peeked into the edge of the camera, watching me from a distance. My supervisor and I exchanged incredulous glances. No one had entered the morgue all night, yet that shadow was there, right at the edge of perception, as if something had been watching us. That same night, I returned to the lab, obsessed with finding answers. Each time I reviewed the details, each change in the notes, each alteration in the evidence, I felt a presence brushing against me, a force that challenged me, seeming to anticipate each of my movements. I tried to rationalize, to think that perhaps it was all a mistake, that maybe fatigue was playing tricks on me. But deep down, I knew something more was happening. It was as if someone or something was mocking my disbelief, as if this presence in the morgue wanted to leave me a message whose dark magnitude I had yet to comprehend. For weeks, the presence persisted, with subtle changes that seemed to be only for my eyes. A slight disorder in the documents, instruments out of place, a shadow at the edge of my vision. We never managed to identify the man or decipher the origin of that note. And each time I returned to the morgue, I felt that penetrating gaze waiting. Now, every night when I leave, I feel its weight as a silent warning. Maybe one day the truth will be revealed. Maybe not. But every time I cross the door of the morgue in the cold abyss that envelops me, I know that someone or something has been here, leaving me alone with the void, in a game that only death understands. If you're enjoying these dark tales and want more, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to Shadows of Fear, and share your thoughts in the comments. Every bit of support helps us keep exploring the unknown together. Come, be part of this community, and don't miss a single story. Now, let's continue.
Since I began working as a forensic pathologist, I learned that death never comes alone. It always brings its own secrets. The morgue, with its solemn silence and cold walls, is a kind of sanctuary for those mysteries. There, under the unrelenting fluorescent light, I have dissected hidden stories, tearing answers from silent bodies. But there are nights when even the dead seem to want to keep something to themselves. This was one of those nights. I felt it in the air, heavy and expectant, as if an invisible whisper were lingering in the shadows. It was past midnight, that hour when even the dead seemed to rest more peacefully. The morgue was silent, save for the dull hum of the ventilation system and the occasional clatter of my instruments. I leaned over the body of a young man in his 20s, brutally stabbed in an alley, his wounds narrating a fury so excessive it felt almost personal. The police wanted answers, but I could only think about how unsettling the atmosphere felt that night. I was alone. The sterile white light illuminated every corner, but the weight of an invisible gaze bore down on my neck, as if someone were watching me from the shadows. I glanced at the observation window, the one detectives sometimes use to follow the procedure, and confirmed that no one was there. The door was closed, and I hadn't heard anyone come in. I forced myself to return to the body, to focus on the wounds and the angle of the cuts, but the sensation persisted, like a subtle pressure at the edges of my mind. Each time I turned to grab an instrument, that uncomfortable feeling intensified, becoming more tangible, almost real. It seemed impossible, but I found myself stealing quick glances over my shoulder, as if at any moment something might emerge from the gloom. I felt like I wasn't alone. After what felt like an eternity, I completed the autopsy. But that feeling of unease, which usually disappeared when I closed the final suture, lingered that night. Before leaving, I decided to check the security recordings. I needed to confirm that I was alone, that this was all a trick of the shadows, a result of accumulated fatigue. The security room was deserted. I quickly fast-forwarded the recording of the autopsy room, watching my own figure hunched over the body, alone in the sterile, silent space. At first, everything appeared normal. But as the footage progressed, something startled me. In a fleeting instant, while examining one of the wounds, a shadow moved in the background, just beyond the observation window. My heart stopped. I replayed the recording at a slower speed, and there it was. A tall figure, broad-shouldered, watching me from the other side of the glass. There was no face, just a heavy, dark shadow, motionless, yet radiating an intensity that froze my blood. It was as if those invisible eyes had been boring into me throughout the entire autopsy. I advanced the recording over and over, watching how the figure remained still, silently observing me. Then, when I turned to leave the room in the recording, the figure faded away, disappearing into the shadows as if it had never been there. My hands trembled as I stopped the video. I reviewed the security logs with the staff the next day. There was no trace of activity in the observation room. No one had used their access cards, and the cameras showed the door closed all night. And yet, I knew someone had been watching me. I knew that, although I couldn't prove it, I had felt that presence with every fiber of my being. That night, I returned to the morgue with the sensation that someone was waiting for me. As I walked down the cold hallway, a certainty washed over me that almost made me stop. That stranger in the darkness was not just any intruder. No, it was something much older, something that fed on secrets, fears, and every decomposed body I left in that room. The weight of that invisible gaze was there, waiting, knowing that I felt it too, aware that perhaps one day it wouldn't be me performing the autopsy, but the body lying on the table.
If you're enjoying these dark tales and want more, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to Shadows of Fear, and share your thoughts in the comments. Every bit of support helps us keep exploring the unknown together. Come, be part of this community, and don't miss a single story. Now, let's continue. In the heart of a remote village in Colombia, surrounded by dense forests and shrouded in a constant veil of mist, an event occurred that still chills its inhabitants. Diana, the young woman with a radiant smile and a generous spirit, was known by everyone in the community. Her sudden death, caused by a rare and fatal heart condition, plunged the village into deep sorrow. The church bells rang with sadness the day of her funeral, and a silent crowd gathered to bid her farewell, convinced that her soul had already found peace. However, that very night, the village ceased to be a refuge of calm. From the depths of the cemetery, just past midnight, came heart-wrenching moans that froze the blood of those living nearby. The cries were not the natural sounds of the wind or the creaking of branches. They were human wails, agonizing and desperate, emanating from the freshly sealed grave of Diana. For 2 days and 2 nights, the screams continued, driving the neighbors mad as they gathered in the streets, too afraid to cross the cemetery gates but unable to ignore what was happening. Finally, Diana's family, driven by fear and desperation, sought permission from the priest and the mayor to open the grave. The request was granted, and before an expectant crowd, the tombstone was removed and the coffin exposed. The lid creaked as it was lifted, and a thick silence fell over the place. Inside the coffin, Diana lay untouched, her skin still fresh, but with an expression that sent chills through everyone. Her eyes, wide and fixed, held an infinite anguish. Before the witnesses could react, a muffled groan escaped from her lips, and her trembling hands slowly rose. Panic swept through the crowd. Screams and sobs filled the air as some ran in terror while others stood hypnotized, watching as Diana, with slow, brittle movements, began to sit up. Her legs faltered beneath her, but something in her gaze seemed to demand more than help. Those who tried to approach recoiled, feeling an inhuman cold emanating from her body. Her family, torn between fear and hope, surrounded her, unsure of what to do or think. In the days that followed, Diana's behavior grew increasingly disturbing. She no longer recognized anyone, not even her parents or friends. Her eyes, shadowed by unknown darkness, seemed to see beyond this world. She spoke in a raspy voice about gray landscapes and figures that crawled in silence. She described how, from that place, she had witnessed her own burial, surrounded by shadows that whispered her name. Every word that left her lips struck the hearts of her listeners, and the sense that something unnatural had brought her back grew stronger. "Death is only the beginning," she murmured incessantly. Her stories grew darker as she began to describe a tall, gaunt figure with hollow eyes who had been watching her from the depths of that shadowy world. The figure, she claimed, had followed her across the divide and now whispered from the shadows of her room at night. The entire village began to change. Animals fled in fear, and plants in the gardens near Diana's house withered for no apparent reason. The children, who once played freely in the streets, no longer dared pass by her house, where candles seemed to go out without wind and the windows vibrated with inaudible whispers. Her family, on the brink of despair, consulted the priest, but even he, after visiting Diana, left pale and mute, as though his faith had been stripped by what he had seen. One night, the tension reached a breaking point in an event that would be forever etched in the collective memory. Diana vanished from the house without a trace. The search, led by her parents and friends, took them once again to the cemetery, where some claimed to have seen a pale figure wandering between the tombstones. When they arrived, the full moon illuminated a sight they would never forget. In her former grave, Diana's body lay, now showing obvious signs of decomposition. Her skin, which had been intact only days before, was now dry and cracked, her eyes empty, and her mouth twisted into an impossible smile. Horror and disbelief seized everyone. No one could explain how the body had returned to its resting place or why it had begun to rot so rapidly. An old man from the village, known for his tales of ancient legends, whispered with a trembling voice, "What returns from death is not always what it was. Sometimes it brings something with it." By morning, the rumors had intensified. Some swore they had seen Diana walking through the village, leaving no trace or shadow, while others claimed to hear the same mournful moan that had escaped her grave on that fateful night. The terrified inhabitants began boarding up their windows and avoiding the cemetery at all costs. No one spoke openly about the matter, but everyone knew that Diana's death, or rather her return, was an omen of something far more sinister. Weeks later, the case was deemed an unsolved mystery. Visits to the cemetery dwindled, and Diana's house was abandoned, a silent reminder of a horror that defied all understanding. Nights in the village grew restless again, and every breeze that passed through the streets carried with it a distant echo, a whisper that said, "Death is only the beginning." To this day, the villagers shudder when they remember. The scars of that event still pulse beneath the surface, a reminder that there are things that should not return from where they belong, and that in the fine line between life and death, there are secrets that should remain buried forever. If you're enjoying these dark tales and want more, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to Shadows of Fear, and share your thoughts in the comments. Every bit of support helps us keep exploring the unknown together. Come, be part of this community, and don't miss a single story. Now, let's continue. In the depths of the Colombian Amazon jungle, where the humidity soaks every corner and the darkness seems eternal, there lies a small indigenous village. Its inhabitants, descendants of an ancient civilization, carefully guard their traditions and legends, many of which are tied to supernatural forces and dark entities. Among them is the story of Anahi, a young shaman who had been chosen to lead her tribe toward a prosperous future. Anahi was known for her wisdom and her deep connection to the spirit of the jungle. However, during an ancestral ritual, something went terribly wrong. In an attempt to summon a protective ancestral spirit, Anahi accidentally opened a door to a dark and unknown realm. A malevolent force seized her, corrupting both her body and soul. Days later, Anahi died under strange circumstances. Her body, once radiating vitality, had become cold and rigid as stone, and her eyes, once full of wisdom, were now empty and glassy. The tribe's shamans tried to perform a purification ritual, but nothing could break the curse that bound her to that dark entity. On the night of her burial, the village descended into chaos. Heart-wrenching screams echoed from the cemetery, where Anahi had been laid to rest. Terrified villagers claimed to see a spectral figure emerging from the grave, a figure that seemed to be Anahi, but with eyes that burned like embers and a macabre smile revealing sharp teeth. As the days passed, the attacks grew more frequent. Crops withered, animals died mysteriously, and villagers began to disappear without a trace. Some claimed to have seen Anahi roaming the jungle, accompanied by sinister shadows. Desperate, the shamans tried to contact the ancestral spirits for help, but they either remained indifferent or were filled with fear. The legend tells that Anahi had become a muina, an evil spirit that feeds on the fear and suffering of the living. It was said that the muina could possess humans, turning them into its slaves, and thus spreading its dark realm. On the brink of despair, the villagers decided to take a desperate measure to burn Anahi's body. They believed this would destroy the muina that inhabited her. With great sorrow, they carried her body into a jungle clearing and surrounded it with firewood. As the flames consumed Anahi's body, the shamans chanted ancient songs to protect the village. However, when the flames died down and the ashes were scattered by the wind, the villagers realized they had made a mistake. the Muina had not been destroyed. On the contrary, it seemed to have multiplied, spreading its influence throughout the jungle. Anahi's screams could be heard from every corner, and the shadows moved with greater speed and ferocity. The villagers, realizing they could not defeat the Muina on their own, decided to abandon their home and seek refuge in other lands. But they knew that the evil they had unleashed would chase them to the end of their days. If you're enjoying these dark tales and want more, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to Shadows of Fear, and share your thoughts in the comments. Every bit of support helps us keep exploring the unknown together. Come, be part of this community, and don't miss a single story. Now, let's continue. In the remote village of San Lorenzo, nestled between snow-capped mountains and shadowy forests, there is an ancient legend about a forgotten cemetery where the darkest of sinners lie buried. It is said that on nights of the full moon, a forbidden ritual can resurrect the dead, but at a terrible cost. Their souls will be corrupted by a malevolent force. Don Anselmo, an elderly hermit known for his wisdom and dark knowledge, had studied ancient grimoires for years that spoke of this ritual. Obsessive about the power it would grant him, he decided to perform the ceremony on the darkest night of the year. In the cemetery, beneath the pale light of the moon, Don Anselmo drew a magical circle around a freshly dug grave. With a hoarse voice and bloodshot eyes, he recited the forbidden words, summoning the forces of darkness. The earth trembled, the wind howled, and an icy cold enveloped the place. Suddenly, the coffin burst open, and a twisted, emaciated figure emerged. It was the body of his deceased wife, but her eyes burned with an infernal fire, and her mouth twisted into a macabre smile, revealing sharp teeth. At first, Don Anselmo felt elated. He had done what no one else had dared. But soon he realized his terrible mistake. His wife, now possessed by a dark force, turned against him. With supernatural strength, she knocked him down and began biting him frantically, transferring the curse to him. The next day, the people of San Lorenzo found Don Anselmo's mangled body, and his wife was wandering the cemetery, her eyes hollow and with an insatiable thirst for blood. Terror gripped the village. The elders warned that a malignant force had been unleashed, and that only the unity of the people could stop it. They decided to perform a collective exorcism, but the force that possessed the woman was too powerful. No prayer or blessing seemed to have any effect. The curse spread quickly, turning more people into bloodthirsty monsters. The village became a battlefield. The infected, with glowing eyes and spasmodic movements, attacked anyone who crossed their path. The few survivors sought refuge in the church, but they knew it was only a matter of time before the monsters found them. Meanwhile, deep in the forest, a hooded figure watched with a malevolent smile, pleased with the chaos he had set into motion. He was an ancient enemy of Don Anselmo, a necromancer who had been waiting for the right moment to seek revenge. He had manipulated the old man, guiding him toward the performance of the forbidden ritual, all to unleash chaos and plunge the world into darkness. The necromancer, with his arcane power, managed to control the infected, turning them into his army. His plan was simple: to free the dead across the world and plunge humanity into an age of eternal darkness. The survivors of San Lorenzo, desperate, sought help from an ancient monastery. There, an old monk, familiar with the church's darkest secrets, revealed the only way to stop the necromancer. Destroy the grimoire containing the forbidden ritual. A small band of brave souls ventured out into the night to steal the grimoire. They knew it was a suicidal mission, but they were willing to sacrifice themselves to save humanity. After a dangerous journey, they infiltrated the necromancer's castle and stole the book. With the grimoire in their hands, the heroes returned to San Lorenzo and destroyed it in a purifying bonfire. At the same time, the survivors, led by the monk, launched a final assault against the army of the dead. The battle was fierce. The infected fought with supernatural strength, but the living defended themselves with tooth and nail. Finally, thanks to a heroic sacrifice, they managed to defeat the necromancer and his creatures. With the necromancer's death, the curse began to fade. The infected reverted to their human forms, though forever scarred by psychological wounds. The village of San Lorenzo, though suffering irreparable losses, had survived. However, the threat never fully disappeared. It is said that on the darkest nights, when the full moon illuminates the cemeteries, the dead still whisper their names, longing to return to life. And the necromancer, though defeated, may one day return, bringing with him new nightmares and horrors. If you're enjoying these dark tales and want more, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to Shadows of Fear, and share your thoughts in the comments. Every bit of support helps us keep exploring the unknown together. Come, be part of this community, and don't miss a single story. Now, let's continue. The village of Rascafria, nestled between mountains and dense forests, held a nearly motionless peace in the 70s. Its inhabitants, barely 100, lived in stone houses that seemed as much a part of the landscape as the trees, and the monastery of El Paular was the heart of their traditions. During Holy Week, especially on Good Friday, processions and vigils were held with almost ritualistic solemnity. There were no bright lights, only candles and silence. The story began in the early hours of a Good Friday in 1973. That night, a group of young people, including Angela and Jose, decided to spend the night in the ruins of an old church near the monastery. It was said that the site was protected by an ancient spirit and that no one should remain there past midnight. But that night, driven by curiosity and disbelief, Angela and her friends chose to defy the warnings. Once inside, the cold and dampness seeped into their bones. They sat on the ground, wrapped in blankets, surrounded by shadows broken only by the faint glow of a candle. As the night wore on, the group, now more sleepy than brave, began to close their eyes when a soft shattered the silence. Angela's eyes flew open, holding her breath as she looked at her friends, but they all seemed equally puzzled and afraid. The weeping seemed to come from the shadows, a low and monotonous sound like a woman crying. The group looked toward the entrance, where a faint figure appeared in the darkness, tall and thin, with a veil covering her face. The lament grew more intense, filling the air with a suffocating sorrow that crept into the soul. Jose, attempting to be brave, approached the figure. But as soon as he took a step forward, he felt a wave of cold that froze him in place, as if something were holding him back. Angela reached out to touch his arm, but noticed his skin was as cold as the stone floor beneath them. The woman slowly raised her face, revealing her eyes, completely black. Through the veil, one could barely make out the outline of her mouth, murmuring unintelligible words filled with anguish. One of the boys whispered a prayer, but that only seemed to anger the specter, who let out a piercing scream that made the walls tremble and extinguished the candle completely. Plunged into total darkness, the young people tried to flee, but the church door seemed sealed shut. The lady's wail grew louder, and suddenly one of the boys collapsed to the floor, his body stiff as if trapped in a nightmare. Desperate, Angela remembered the stories she'd heard. They said the woman was the lady of the monastery, a young woman who had died on Good Friday, centuries ago, after her fiancé abandoned her to become a monk. Since then, the lady wandered through Roskafria, appearing every Good Friday to seek company and mourn her loss. Finally, someone managed to force the door open, and the group ran toward the village. When they arrived, they found one of the village elders, Don Fermin, who, seeing them pale and trembling, instantly knew what had happened. "Were you in the church?" he asked, his eyes stern, his voice barely a whisper. "I told you no one should go there tonight." The young people nodded, terrified and regretful. Don Fermin muttered a prayer, and before dawn broke, he led them back to the church to perform a purification ritual, hoping to calm the lady's spirit. That same afternoon, as the village awoke, everyone already knew the story, and from that day on, no one in Roskafria dared approach the church on Good Friday. It was said that the lady remained there, waiting, seeking those who would dare to interrupt her eternal lament. If you're enjoying these dark tales and want more, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to Shadows of Fear, and share your thoughts in the comments. Every bit of support helps us keep exploring the unknown together. Come, be part of this community, and don't miss a single story. Now, let's continue. In a secluded corner of the city, Viviano lived in an old manor on the outskirts. His life, simple and austere, aligned with his religious habits. Every Easter week, silence ruled his home, and he dedicated the days to prayer and reflection. However, one particular Easter week in the 1960s, something dark and mysterious happened, something Viviano could never explain rationally, though he was never the same afterward. Good Friday began like any other. Viviano had just returned from church, where he had attended the Passion ceremony. Once home, he prepared a frugal, simple meal, fitting for the day's solemnity. He was accompanied by his younger sister, Anna, who visited to share in those days of quiet devotion. Midway through the afternoon, as the warmth became dense and oppressive, there was a soft knock at the front door. Viviano approached cautiously, and upon opening it, he found a gaunt, hunched man dressed in faded, dirty clothing. His expression was distant, almost faded, as though his mind wandered in another realm. In a low murmur, the stranger asked for a little food and water. Without hesitation, Viviano nodded and went to the kitchen to prepare something. Meanwhile, Anna, uneasy, watched the visitor from a corner of the dining room. Viviano served him a slice of bread, a piece of cheese, and a glass of cool water. Returning to the entryway, he noticed the man staring intently at the crucifix on the wall, his gaze vacant yet fixed, as if recognizing something in it. When Viviano handed him the food, the man murmured his thanks, took the bread and water, and remained standing there, as though waiting for something more. The man's presence felt almost unreal, and as they observed him, it was as though time had halted in that small room. After a few silent moments, the stranger inclined his head toward Viviano and spoke in a grave tone. "Thank you, friend. Not everyone is willing to share the little they have." With one last look at the crucifix, he turned and left through the front door. Viviano and Anna stood in silence, watching the figure slowly disappear down the dirt path. Barely a minute later, Viviano went to the window to look for the man, but he was already gone. Anna, eyes wide, whispered, "There's no way he could have left so quickly." That night, restlessness would not leave them. Anna began to feel a chill in the room, as if the man's presence had left an invisible mark. Viviano, unable to shake the sense that something inexplicable had occurred, tried to calm himself by reading a psalm, yet a strange heaviness continued to press on his chest. At midnight, thunder rumbled, and rain began to fall fiercely. Suddenly, a creak at the back door made them both jump. They exchanged glances, their faces pale under the faint light of the oil lamp. Without thinking, Viviano rose and went to the door. Through the foggy glass, he could make out a silhouette, standing still in the rain. Despite his growing fear, he opened the door. There, on the threshold, was the man from that afternoon, soaked and staring straight at him. Without speaking, the man extended his hand, and not knowing why, Viviano returned the empty glass. The man offered a haunting smile and vanished, as if swallowed by the night. Viviano remained silent, frozen in place. Slowly, he closed the door and returned to Anna, who looked at him with barely restrained terror. "That man, I saw him in a dream before I arrived here," she whispered. "It's as though he was asking for something, seeking redemption." The two spent the rest of the night awake, unable to sleep, feeling as if an invisible force was watching them. At dawn, Viviano and Anna decided to search for the man, or at least discover who he was. They visited nearby areas, asking neighbors if anyone had seen him, describing his appearance in detail. No one remembered seeing him, either before or after that day. The thought that he might not belong to this world began to settle in their minds, though neither dared say it aloud. Days later, while visiting the church, Viviano found an old painting hidden in one of the side rooms of the main nave. As he looked at it, he felt his blood run cold. The image depicted a man on his knees, in an attitude of humility and resignation, facing a figure of the resurrected Christ. The man's face was the same as that of the stranger who had asked for food in his home. Viviano stood there, paralyzed, a feeling of both anguish and peace washing over him. That night back home, Viviano couldn't sleep. Something within him told him that the apparition had been a sign, a warning. He tried to pray, but a strange thought crossed his mind. What if it was Christ himself who came to test my compassion? He felt a deep chill, and with a sudden impulse, went out to the yard under the starry sky. He knelt on the damp earth, and through tears asked forgiveness for his doubts and promised to give more of himself to others. Since then, Viviano never saw the man again, nor found any explanation for what had happened. Yet every Easter week, he felt a presence surround him, as if the visitor were still watching, awaiting the fulfillment of his promise. If you're enjoying these dark tales and want more, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to Shadows of Fear, and share your thoughts in the comments. Every bit of support helps us keep exploring the unknown together. Come, be part of this community, and don't miss a single story. Now, let's continue. In the 1960s, a young priest named Prudenciano was assigned to a parish in a remote village, barely inhabited by 200 people. This small settlement, nestled among mountains and difficult trails, held an air of mystery that Prudenciano sensed immediately. As a newly ordained priest with medical training, the bishop considered him the perfect man for a community with superstitious beliefs, which aligned well with his skepticism toward the supernatural. With a mix of unease and curiosity, Prudenciano packed his belongings and embarked on the long journey to the settlement, where a humble chapel and an expectant community awaited him. Upon his arrival, the villagers welcomed him enthusiastically, grateful to finally have a religious figure to tend to their souls. In the following weeks, Prudenciano adapted to the routine of the place. He organized masses, provided first aid, and gradually improved the conditions of the chapel. However, as Easter week approached, the atmosphere in the village began to change. Conversations that once revolved around daily matters were now filled with unsettling whispers about the arrival of the Weeping Virgin. Prudenciano, ever the skeptic, listened to these stories with doubt, though he could not help but notice the seriousness with which the locals spoke. Just nights before Good Friday, a young villager asked Father Prudenciano if he would be able to drive away the Virgin. To his surprise, an elderly woman intervened, warning him of the danger posed by that apparition, which they claimed had manifested every Easter week for several years. Prudenciano dismissed the tale, believing it to be mere folklore. Yet the testimonies aligned. The apparition appeared in the dead of night, weeping with a lament so haunting that it froze the blood of those who heard it. Almost everyone claimed it had taken 2 boys in previous years, whisking them away into the mountains without a trace. Prudenciano tried to reassure the villagers, reminding them that faith should not lean toward superstition. However, on the night of Good Friday, a palpable tension gripped the place. As soon as the ceremony ended, the villagers quickly retreated to their homes, locking doors and windows, pleading with the priest to remain in his quarters until dawn. The warning of an older woman echoed in his mind. "Don't go out, Father. That night, no one is safe in the mountains." Settled in the small room behind the chapel, Prudenciano tried to distract himself with his books. Yet the silence outside was almost absolute, a silence so thick it felt suffocating. It was then that a faint lament broke the calm, barely perceptible but unmistakable. Prudenciano paused, his pulse quickening, struggling to convince himself it was merely the wind. However, the sound repeated, clearer this time, a deep sob, laden with sadness and desolation. Feeling a chill run down his spine, the priest rose and cautiously stepped outside. What he saw froze his blood. A tall, thin figure, shrouded in a dark cloak, stood a few meters from the chapel, enveloped in darkness. Though its silhouette vaguely resembled a virgin, it emanated a sinister and unnatural energy. In front of it, a village boy, around 10 years old, seemed entranced, unable to move or tear his gaze from the apparition. His mother, barely visible in the shadows, screamed in desperation, but her voice failed to break the spell. Unsure of what to do, Prudenciano began to recite the Hail Mary aloud as he slowly approached the boy. Each word felt heavy in the air, as if an invisible force were trying to stop him. The figure turned to face him, and then he saw its eyes, hollow and dark, with only a trace of a viscous red liquid that resembled tears of blood. Prudenciano continued praying, gripping his rosary tightly, even as fear and despair constricted his throat, suffocating him. The apparition let out a scream so profound that Prudenciano dropped the rosary for a moment, clutching his ears. It was a wail not of this world, a cry from an ancient pain so deep that it seemed forgotten by the very earth. The figure, ignoring his prayers, approached the boy, caressed his face, and picked him up. The child fell into a deep faint, as if his life had been ripped away, and the mother collapsed to the ground in despair. Before he could react, Prudenciano watched as the figure glided slowly toward the mountains, the boy still in its arms, disappearing among the trees, as if the very thicket had swallowed it whole. That night, no one could sleep in the village, and at dawn, a thorough search was organized, proving fruitless. The boy had vanished without a trace, just like in the previous years. Moved and terrified, Prudenciano reported what had occurred to the bishop. However, lacking evidence and facing the skepticism of ecclesiastical authorities, his account was received with reservations. Though he was permitted to request a transfer, Prudenciano chose to stay. He knew that this phenomenon exceeded human comprehension, something dark and ancient that loomed over the village each Good Friday, claiming innocent souls. Since then, Father Prudenciano established preventive measures. He advised each family to lock their doors and remain inside during Easter week. He forbade children from going out at night and kept watch every Good Friday, hoping that the apparition would not take another life. Although he never comprehended the origin of that entity, Prudenciano understood that the supernatural had settled in that forgotten land. As the years passed, the village grew, and the tale of the Dark Virgin became a warning passed down through generations. No one dared to challenge tradition, for those few who did paid the highest price. The legend of the Weeping Virgin that roamed every Easter week became etched in the community's memory, a sinister echo that would forever resonate in the mountains. Thank you for listening to our stories until the end. Now, if you haven't already, you can leave your like and subscribe.